This week on The Grit Crusade, when you start to let your work start to consume who you are, then it can become very isolating and a lonely feeling because you become tied to, well, if this doesn't work out, then I'm a failure. If this doesn't work out, then who am I? I'm going to disappoint everybody. I'm going to let everybody down. Like, no, that's just your work. Who you are is not what you do. Who you are is the value that you provide to the world, to the universe, to those under your influence. Hey, Grit Crusaders. My name is Brooke, and I am your host today here on the Grit Crusade podcast. So if it's your first time tuning in, welcome. I'm so excited that you're here. Sure to be a fun 20 or 30 minutes as we dive into this topic today of leadership and leading behind closed doors, or the silent struggle of leadership. Oh, I think the old saying goes, it's lonely at the top is so true in so many ways. But we're going to talk about not only what that feels like, but also what it is we can do about it and how we can become more connected with others and those around us to not leave us with that isolated, lonely feeling. So be sure that you subscribe to the podcast if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your favorite podcast. Or if you're tuning in on YouTube, be sure you subscribe to our channel and like the show, because what that does is it helps us build our audience. It's no cost to you, and it helps us get our message out to more people. And that's what this is really about, is us leaving a dent and impacting others. So it's always more than just me in front of the camera. You see me on camera, but I always have a team behind the camera. So I speak very collectively about us, because it's in all things, leadership in life, it's never something that you're going at alone. And so let's start talking about, why does it feel so lonely at the top? So I tried to look up where that quote came from, and there's actually a new movie that came out this year, 2023 is when we're recording, and it's called It's Lonely at the Top. I haven't seen it yet, but I didn't find an actual person of where that quote came from. So if you know where it came from, drop it in the comments, or shoot me a message at chat@brookplack.com, because I would like to know where that came from. But I think it's a very true saying. And so why is it that leaders often feel so isolated? So I know in my leadership journey, I came from being a classroom teacher where we had a set curriculum that was given to us to teach our kids. And these are the things they needed to learn. And then you were always meeting and always doing. But then somewhere along the way, when you start your first business, or you start a family and you're leading a household, I think it's applicable both in work and our personal lives, because we all are leaders in our own way, that sometimes we start feeling like we have to have it all together, or know it all, or do it all. And then the cracks start coming through, because none of us know it all, and none of us can do it all. So we start realizing that we must know how to make these decisions, and that weight starts to pile on us when we realize how far-reaching the consequences are of our decisions. So I'll talk from a place, because I feel like the only place you can ever talk from authentically is the place that you've been. And then you may also have ideas about where this comes into play in your life. And so for me, I know that the decisions I make in our companies are directly affecting the livelihoods of our staff and our employees, okay? And so when I start to think about that, I'm like, but I have mouths to feed. And if this goes wrong, the people will lose their jobs. And then it can lead into a really unhealthy spiral of all of these things, but what if, right? So what if we buy this new house and then we're spending too much money and then we can't afford it and our kids can't eat and. And so there's something about carrying that weight of knowing that your decisions are affecting others. And I think that is one of the huge reasons of why it can feel, so lonely at the top. And then we start to realize that, how am I going to get through this? How am I going to get out of this situation? The next way is that we sometimes don't feel like we have anyone to turn to. And I think this is especially true when situations are really controversial. And so I'll give you a couple of examples. So in the home life, it could be spiritual, right? Maybe you're starting to unpack and realize the things you learned growing up aren't necessarily true. And then you're trying to figure out how to align those with the person that you're co-parenting with, and at the same time trying to figure out what you're going to teach your children or the next generation or your nieces and nephews or whoever you have influence over, okay? that is a very controversial, hot topic in families and how to address that. And so having those conversations can be hard and you don't know who to turn to or who to find answers to. I know my friend Elizabeth and I are very interested in, and a lot of people I talk to, of unpacking the traditional Western Christianity and things we learned growing up in religion and how to blend those with things we've learned about other religions and how they view God. And so it's been very interesting, but it's also can be a very lonely journey when you don't really know who to turn to. The example I'll give you in business about things that are controversial. Oh, I feel like I'm going to have like PTSD even like sharing this. But COVID during the pandemic. Okay. So we were tasked as business owners and sometimes directed by the government, right? Of to wear a mask, to not wear a mask, to let people in, to not let people in. And here's the big one: to require vaccinations or to not require vaccinations. Now, I am a firm believer that the pandemic was politicized and didn't have to be, okay? So there's lots of stark opinions that come in the middle of that. But there was a time where they said if your business is of X size, your employees must be vaccinated. And I have long-standing, like, hardcore staff members who are so dedicated to our mission and love what we do that we're not going to get vaccinated. And they didn't care what I said. So it put me in a seat as the leader of looking at, am I going to sacrifice this friendship, work relationship, and productivity of our entire company for this government directive or not? And it's very hard to know who to turn to and who you can talk to about these things. Like, it's so hard. And I think that's another reason that it can feel really lonely at the top. So not only is it that our decisions have such far-reaching consequences, but also sometimes we have to make controversial decisions that are not popular, not only amongst the people that they affect, but also like the people we care about, because we don't want to disappoint or upset the people we care about the most. The other thing is the reason, and then like, again, speaking from a place of I'm there, been there, like living it, is when your work, whatever that work is, whether it's inside the home as a homemaker, whether it's a employee showing up to another, like a job that you're working for someone else's mission, or you're leading your own organization, when that work begins to take over so much of your life that you lose who you are outside of that work. And this is how this showed up for me. So with the recent expansion of our youth recreational business, okay, and my real estate company, I have taken a lot of risk, all right? And I don't know where the staircase is leading. I think my dad sent me a quote yesterday that said, you don't have to know the whole staircase. Sometimes you just have to take the first step. And I don't know where that whole staircase is leading, but I know I took a risk in doing this. Okay, calculated risk, right? But it's still very risky. And like, is it going to work? Is it not going to work? How's it going to pan out? How are things going to shake up? Where's the revenue coming from? How is this expansion going to play? All of those questions. And I began to let them consume who I was. Okay, let me say that again. When you start to let your work start to consume who you are, then it can become very isolating and a lonely feeling because you become tied to, well, if this doesn't work out, then I'm a failure. If this doesn't work out, then who am I? I'm going to disappoint everybody. I'm going to let everybody down. Like, no, that's just your work. Who you are is not what you do. Who you are is the value that you provide to the world, to the universe, to those under your influence. So you are a daughter, a son. You are an aunt, an uncle. You are a friend. You are a terrible artist, or you're a, like me, hand raising right now, really bad gardener. Like, you are all of these things that aren't just your work. And so when we start to let our work become who we are, it can cause us to feel so lonely and isolated when we feel insecure in that place. Feeling really lonely at the top can also happen whenever you don't feel like you have anyone to confide in. And so when you are and this is me, this is totally me, and I know a lot of my friends feel this way too. When work is a big part of who you are, you're around the people you work with a lot. Okay. So if you have a struggle with a coworker, all right, someone on your team, who do you confide in? Because you can't confide in somebody else that works at your company without jading their perspective of who they are, like the person that you're struggling with. Or what if you're not really sure about what's going on and the decision you've made in your home? Can you confide in your spouse? Can you confide in your children? Well, no, you're leading your children, so you don't want to confide in them because you don't want them to see doubt in you, or maybe should you? And so not having that circle of support and the people that you can confide in lead to this. And lastly, when we feel like that we must project this image of confidence and strength and having it all together all the time, but that doesn't feel authentic to who we are at that moment. Okay, so like not being able to feel vulnerable. So that all leads to these isolated, lonely feelings that we feel as a leader because, we feel like we've got to know the answers, but we're just human. We're just a regular girl, just a regular person that's taken a big, brave step into leadership in some fashion. Could be a ministry, could be in your hobby. Maybe you're seen as the expert in your hobby. Maybe it's not something that you do for a living. But then one day you don't have it all together. And how do you reconcile that? How do you go from this place of feeling lonely, whether it's because you realize that your decisions really affect other people or that you are needing to act a certain way, but that's not really who you like what you feel. So then you're like at odds with that internally. What do we do? How do we reconcile those two feelings and still be able to move forward? So that's what we're going to talk about right after we do my favorite segment on the podcast. So this is your first episode. We do a fun segment on every podcast called Trivia in the Trenches because the show is the Grit Crusade, and grit stands for getting real in the trenches. So Trivia in the Trenches is our fun segment that has nothing to do with what we're talking about on the podcast, but gives us a fun little brain break so we can dive in this together. Okay, are you ready? Here we go. So when I have a guest, I ask them, but today it's just me and you, so I'm going to ask you. Trivia in the Trenches. What ice cream chain sold a ketchup-flavored ice cream? Dun-dun, Baskin-Robbins, right? If you think about ice cream chains, you'll think about Baskin-Robbins. But all right, so here it is. You ready? Here's the information. They claim that this was the only vegetable-flavored ice cream they ever produced. However, after making gallons of the stuff, they realized it would not sell to anyone but 8-year-old boys determined to disgust their sisters no matter the personal sacrifice, and it was never added to the 51 flavors lineup or offered for sale. Okay. I'm going to argue that a tomato is a fruit, so technically they still don't have a vegetable-based ice cream. But here's another fun fact that I found out about ketchup-flavored ice cream. Are you ready? So Ed Sheeran is the singer, right? He is absolutely obsessed with ketchup. He even has a tattoo of Heinz ketchup like on his forearm. Well, in 2018, he went to Dublin to do a 2-concert series, and a local ice cream shop called Gelati made his favorite flavor, ketchup flavored ice cream, okay? And they gave it out for free to all concert goers. And we're like, hey, stop by before or after the concert. You can get a free ice cream. Like, talk about marketing genius. So we still don't have Heinz flavored ketchup, but I am obsessed with ketchup flavored chips. So I was traveling last year through to Costa Rica and back. And in one of the airports I stopped in, they had ketchup flavored Ruffles or Lay's. I can't remember. I think Lay's maybe. And so then I came back to the States and Googled it, and they're like ridiculously expensive on like eBay or Amazon. So we don't have them in the U.S. that I know of, but I am a huge ketchup flavored chip person. I haven't tried the ice cream yet though. All right, diving back into our topic today of it's lonely at the top and the leadership struggles with this isolated feeling that we have, whatever the reason is that we're feeling isolated. We touched on a few of those on the first part of the episode. What can we do about it? So here is something that is not like statistically or research proven. This is from my journey. But if you Google leadership lonely at the top or leadership isolation, this will come up in almost every article that you come to. Forbes.com, New York Times, all of that. So, but for me, this is like something I'm talking from a place of experience. In order to avoid or to combat, if you're there now, that feeling of isolation, you must put the supports in place before you need them. Okay. And if you're like, oh, but I'm feeling that right now, that's why I'm listening to this episode, Brooke. Well, then put them in place now. And even if you can't do it overnight, do it a little bit at a time. And so, what do those supports look like? First and foremost, a business coach. Okay. If it's not in the budget to hire a one-on-one business coach, you can get into group coaching. You can find a Facebook group that aligns with whatever industry or hobby or topic you're in, whether it's motherhood or guitar playing or whatever it is. Find a community support if you can't find a coach in that way. So, but having a coach helps you to identify the limiting beliefs, the incorrect thinking patterns that you're having, and to shine light in those situations, okay? So find yourself a coach or a coaching group or community that can help you through these and be vulnerable when you're talking to them. Don't shy away and lie to your coach, okay? The next episode that's coming after this is a huge episode about one conversation that my business coach and I had and how it completely changed my thinking. So be sure and tune in to the episode next week that comes after this one. All right. So first thing is to get yourself a business coach. Next, get yourself a therapist. I am telling you right now, it is a game changer to get into therapy. And I'm a seasonal therapy believer. And so here's what I mean by that. You don't always need a therapist, in my opinion. Some people do. Get it. You get it. There's no judgment here. But I feel like there are seasons in life when you need therapy to get through hard situations. So if you're having these isolated and lonely feelings, they can lead to anxiety, depression, self-doubt, and a therapist can help you process those feelings, those thinking patterns that you're having, identifying them, calling them what they are, being able to figure out where they came from, and then being able to help you come up with new ways of thinking. So in the state of Arkansas, which is where I am, there is free therapy. You get I think it's 4 or 8 free therapy visits by calling the mental health hotline. It's not a suicide hotline. It is not I feel like I'm going to die if I don't get help hotline. It is just reaching out. And so many health insurance companies now are offering therapy for especially virtual therapy, telehealth services for no charge or just your copay, and you have no balance after that. So there's so many ways to get into therapy. And again, just like I said with coaching, there's also group therapy and other things. So look into it because there are no to low cost options as well, all the way up to cash pay, So, but if you wait until things are so distraught, oftentimes you can't see and think clearly enough to make these good decisions of having a business coach in place, having a therapist on call or therapy that you're in, when you need it, and being very honest and vulnerable about that. And this one is almost like the key to all keys, is having a non-work related friend or mentor. Okay, so it is great to have friends at work. I build relationships with the people I work with on a personal level because I don't feel like I work with their work self. I feel like I work with them as a whole human. So I get to know people on a personal level, but having a non-work friend or mentor that's not your work mentor that you can talk through these situations with. Because when you have those hard decisions to make, things that are weighty and far-reaching consequences of these decisions, it's good to have somebody from the outside looking in. And so when I say non-work related, you're like, well, I don't even work outside the home. I'm a homemaker. Or maybe I'm self-employed, so I don't have any coworkers. I mean somebody that's not in it with you every day. So if you're working inside the home, then not your spouse, right? If you're a solo employee, you run your own thing and it's just you, then it's somebody else that's not directly in your day-to-day, not your vendor, not your contractor, like somebody that's not in it with you that can just give you a non-biased opinion and also remind you about the great things about yourself. Okay, So that's my first piece of advice. That was a long one. 3 parts to one piece was to put the supports in place before you need them. Next, and like this, you may not agree with me on this one, but give it a try before you knock it. Okay? Write advice to yourself as if you're someone else. Okay, I'm going to say that again. So how we combat these feelings of isolation and loneliness. What would you tell someone else? Write advice to yourself as if you're someone else. So here's the situation. Here's where we're at. What advice would you what advice would you give in this situation to someone else? And then take it. Like us exercising self-compassion, the fact that we don't know it all and we don't have to know it all is so hard sometimes. But like if you would give compassion to your friend who's navigating this situation, give compassion to yourself. Like you got this, you can do this, but you don't have to know and have it all figured out on the first go round. All right, so put the supports in place. Take the advice that you would be giving someone else in the same situation and stick to your healthy habits. I am the worst at this. Like, I feel like when things get crazy at work, it's just like I get crazy at life altogether. And then I forget the fact that all the things that keep me sane and healthy are, for me, I drink warm lemon water every morning. I'm juicing celery and other fruits. I'm working out. I'm meditating. I'm having downtime where nothing is scheduled and I'm not just scrolling my phone and scrolling social media, actual downtime, whether I'm outside and, sitting on the porch, reading a book, whatever that is to you. But stick to those healthy habits because when everything else gets crazy, having those healthy habits in place are actually what make you better. You're able to make better decisions, more quality decisions. You're able to see things for what they are and not get into this mental spiral of, what if, or I'm not enough, or I can't do this, or I'm all alone. And speaking the truth into it of, no, you are not all alone. You do have people in this with you. You do have people that are more creative than you. You do have people that are better at coming up with ideas than you. That's why they're on your team. And lastly, have a hobby. It is the most simple thing ever, but we forget this when we get busy in life. If someone asks you, like I always ask people in interviews, what do you do for fun? And if their answer is nothing, then that I know that's a growth area for them. Not mean I'm not going to hire them, but it's a growth area. I think the only time that, not the only time, but one of the only times it's warranted to feel like you don't have a hobby is major transitions in life. Maybe you've gotten a divorce and you're having to reset your life. You've had a newborn. You're caring for an elderly parent or grandparent. Like those times, it's hard. I totally get it. But absence of those like very critical hard times in life, have a hobby and one that you are not making money at, that you aren't planning to make money at, and that you just do for fun. You have to be no good at it. You don't have to be any good at it. You don't have to be a great artist. You don't have to be a great gardener. You don't have to be you're good at disc golf, but find something that you enjoy and do it for fun and build it into your schedule. And when you realize it's not into your schedule, get it back in there. And then don't be mad at yourself because you did it, like you backslid. No, here I am. Let's just move on and go forward. Man, it's just been so long since I've gotten out for a run or a walk or gone to the park or spent time with my dog. Like, that's okay. Like, do it now. Start now. Start from where you are and not always worrying about what we didn't get done in the past. And so for me in my journey, I just hope that I have shined some light today for you in your leadership journey, whatever that looks like, whether it's in the home or whether it's in the office or working for your own mission, and realizing that, yes, it can be lonely at the top. And there are times when it feels that way, but we don't have to live there and you don't have to stay there and it doesn't have to stay that way. Until next time. Thanks for listening to The Grit Crusade. I'm Brooke Plack. Join me again next week on your favorite podcast platform or on YouTube. This podcast is produced by ClintonCreative.com.